President Trump sending his clearest statement yet. He wants the U.S. military doing more to police American cities. It's the how and where that he's still fuzzy on. The president signed an order to create so-called specialized units in the National Guard trained in police work. National Guard troops are, as we speak, already patrolling the streets of this city, Washington, D.C., and as of this weekend, some are armed. The Secretary of Defense spoke on behalf of members of the Guard patrolling the nation's capital.
We're really proud to be a part of defending the nation's capital and ensuring it is safe and beautiful and working with law enforcement. And Mr. President, let me tell you, the morale of the troops, getting out there talking to them, they love this mission. They're grateful to be doing it.
Crime is actually down here in D.C., but the Republican-led House Oversight Committee is now investigating whether D.C. crime statistics have been manipulated after the president claimed they were without evidence. Questions loom as to where President Trump wants the Guard sent next. He has blue cities in states with governors who are Democrats in his sights, but it's cities in states that Trump won last election that have some of the highest crime rates, according to last year's statistics from local jurisdictions, a fact the president ignored today.
Would you also consider sending the National Guard into red states and red cities that are also seeing high crime?
Sure, but there aren't that many of them. If you look at the top 25 cities that for crime, just about every one of those cities is run by Democrats.
The president did seem to back off for now the idea of unilaterally sending forces into other cities.
In a certain way, we should wait to be asked because they have cities that are so under control, out of control. So we go in and fix it. You really want to be asked to go. I hate to barge in on a city and then be treated horribly by corrupt politicians and bad politicians like a guy like Pritzker.
For his part, Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois offered this response to the president.
This is not about fighting crime. This is about Donald Trump searching for any justification to deploy the military in a blue city, in a blue state, to try and intimidate his political rivals. There is no emergency in Chicago that calls for armed military intervention. Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. You are neither wanted here nor needed here.
My law enforcement source tonight knows the reality of policing in Chicago and D.C. He served as chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, executive chief of the D.C. Police, and director of the Illinois State Police. Terry Gaynor is with us now. So, Chief, Capitol Police go through an intense 6-month training at Quantico. The D.C. Police Academy's 28 weeks, followed by more than a year of supervised probation. The Guard do have experience working with local police departments, but they are, I guess I'm asking you, are they ready to serve as specialized, whatever that may mean? I'd be curious to know what you think, police units.
Brianna, thanks. It's good to be with you. No, the National Guard, as it's configured now, is not prepared to do this. There are good men and women there who are trained to do a particular function, war fighting or emergencies in the state or train rails and fires and flood. That's good. They have some roles. In those years, I worked with in the Illinois State Police or out in Washington. We partnered with the National Guard in a lot of ways. In this particular endeavor, arming those men and women and putting them in harm's way is risky and dangerous.
The Guard here in D.C. are now carrying weapons on their person. They had them in vehicles previously. Here's what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said about the decision in the Oval Office today.
It's just common sense to make sure they're armed as well. And so we're rolling out ensuring they're armed, capable of defending themselves and others if need be, supporting law enforcement, and we're proud to be there, sir.
Do you agree with that? Is it common sense that they're armed?
No, it is not. Again, when you put someone out on the street in an environment in which they are not normally operating, and in this area, crime fighting with a weapon, they're not trained for that. And so you mentioned at the beginning all the training law enforcement has, and we get a ton of it about the use of force and de-escalation, how to work with the community, know your community, have great communication, having worked with each other in tough situations, how to handle people in erratic situations. Police train incessantly for that and still re-screw it up on some occasions. So these men and women are just not prepared for it. He's overestimating his assessment of what those National Guard personnel can do now and demonstrating his inexperience in policing in a complex environment.
You were, as I mentioned, with DC Police. You work closely with them as well during your time at the Capitol. The House Oversight Committee is looking into allegations of manipulated DC crime statistics. Did you ever have reason to believe that the city's crime stats were manipulated? And how big of a deal would it be for something like that to happen?
Well, it would be significant if someone was manipulating crime stats. It probably is a federal violation because we're reporting that up through the FBI. And the Metropolitan Police Department was aware of an allegation of misconduct against one of its commanders, and that's an active investigation. But I think it's a leap to go from there to say that all the benefits and gains that police department has made over the last couple of years, or particularly since last year or the year before, is because the numbers have been doctored. I think that's just a canard and trying to make excuses to justify what they're trying to do. And let me tell you this, the DC police and every police department I'm aware of, and I've worked with a lot of them over the country now, works very closely with the FBI and the DEA and the U.S. Marshal Service and ATF. They have good relationships in crime fighting. If there are extra personnel in those agencies to do more for a local police department, then continue partnering with the local police department in the lane of which they're best suited. So for instance, the U.S. Marshal's forte is generally serving warrants. There's a ton of warrants throughout the United States that could use help being served. The FBI, tremendous investigators, and they historically ran a 1 week or 2 week homicide investigation course, kind of a senior level investigative course. They haven't been doing that lately. They don't have enough personnel. So there's a right way to do this, to have a strategy to work together. And God love the National Guard. There is a role for them. We use them extensively during big events in Washington, like the State of the Union or the inauguration, for very particular things for which they were trained. So we can be partners, but throwing them out there, if I put officers on the street armed, asking them to fight crime with as little training as the National Guard is getting now to do that and being brought in from other states, that would be a dereliction of duty. So I think the people making these decisions ought to get their head straight and think through what they're trying to do to these men and women. You're putting people in harm's way.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker he had said this about Chicago. He had actually criticized the administration for cuts to law enforcement in Chicago. They have cut more than $800 million in DOJ grants for local law enforcement, and the president's budget calls for more than $1 billion more in cuts. Why do those kind of cuts stand out when the president is lamenting the state of crime in cities?
Well, in some respects, I think he's speaking with a forked tongue. I know this. In the last 10 years since I left government service, I've been working for the Center for Naval Analysis, one of the big contractors for the Justice Department, who was brought in senior law enforcement officers like myself, experienced in city and county and state policing, and we're working on things like the public safety partnership in some 60 cities across the United States. In the first quarter of those years, the grants were ended for those endeavors that would have focused on the very things we need to do to reduce crime. You may know there's 93 federal jurisdictions across the United States. Project Safe Neighborhood also was a funded program for which just after January of this year, the Department of Justice ended the support they were getting from senior law enforcement officers. Smart Policing Initiative, where law enforcement, the community, were partnering with educational institutions to figure out the socioeconomic causes of crime and then addressing that smartly. That also was ended. So what this governor in Illinois and others are talking about, this president, this Justice Department ended those. Now they come in saying, oh, and by the way, now we're going to help you doing it our way. We're going to send in the National Guard. We're not going to be too concerned about how the community reacts to this, but it sure as hell makes us look good.
Chief Terry Gaynor, great to get your perspective tonight. Thank you so much for being with us.